the brother's still telling you got to stay on top of it and get a more earnest heed. Get a more earnest heed to what? To doing what you need to do. He going to tell you verse 2.
For if the word spoken by angels was steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received the just recompense of reward.
Oh, you mean the word spoken by angels? And we know it is steadfast. It said that every what? Transgression and disobedience receive a just recompense of reward. See, you can't get away with nothing from God. You can't skate through on nothing. Because he's telling you here, every transgression and disobedience receive a just recompense from God. That means he's going to pay you for everything. He's going to get you. You ain't going to slip through the crack. So that's why the title is The Wages of Sin. This telling me it's a wage right here, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And it's not nothing unfair. Matter of fact, the only unfair thing about it, we got to remind people about your cell phones or whatever phone. Sound like a house phone right there. But the only thing that's unfair about it is that the Lord is not punishing us what we really deserve. He's not giving us what we really deserve. He's merciful. But he still is going to pay you something. Every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward. So we need to keep that in mind. Why? Go ahead, verse 3.
How shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord, and was confirmed unto us by them that heard him?
Okay, he said, look, if you understand that there's a price to pay, or the title is The Wages of Sin, there's a wage to pay when you get out of line with God, even in the New Testament, isn't it? If you understand that there's a wage to pay for your wrongdoing, your transgressions, then you should understand that you're going to be in big trouble if you don't get this thing right with God. He said, how shall we escape? Understanding that now, that there's a just recompense, a transgression for every disobedience. There's a recompense and a reward. How should we escape if we neglect so great a salvation, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord and confirmed unto us by them that heard? You won't escape, because he is going to pay you. If you know what's going on and don't complete the mission, you're going to be in trouble. That's what he's telling you. Galatians, the 2nd chapter, though, because now we're going to just read a couple of things that people would misconstrue to make people think they don't have to worry about nothing to do nothing. That all you got to do is just believe on Christ. Just hold on to Christ. Well, how do you hold on to Christ? You got to do something. And you got to avoid doing something else, and that is sinning. Because there's a wage to pay for it. And God is the judge. Galatians, the 2nd chapter. Well, I got 2 different titles for this lesson. I changed it on my handwritten thing to The Wages of Sin, the Judgment of God. I guess y'all got the Judgment of God, the wages of sin. I'm real confused. But I really meant to change it to the other way around, so y'all got the bad copy. So if you want to switch it around, you can do that, because that's the title. For the people in the back, that's the title. Hopefully they didn't print up a bunch of labels. If not, skip it. Anyway, Galatians 2 and verse 16. Galatians 2 and verse 16. We're going to look at something Paul said that if you don't understand the whole story, it'll seem confusing initially. 2 and 16. Go ahead.
Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ.
See, this is the kind of stuff people like to read. Now, we just saw some clear-cut stuff telling us, well, look, you better take heed. It's a price to pay for everything that you do, right? Mm-hmm. And you can get yourself messed up even after you know. So we just saw that in Hebrews 2. But now reading this, if you just stop and read a half a verse or so, it can trip you up. And this is what people like to use. Knowing that a man is not justified by works of the law. So he said, oh, brother, well, I ain't justified by works of the law. I know you're not justified by the works of the law because you're already a sinner. You already broke the works of the law. You already broke that. So I know you cannot be justified by the works of the law because you done blew that. But that is not saying that you don't have to keep the law. That's not what it's saying. It's talking about how you're going to get justified. Now, if you're going to try to say, well, I'm just going to be good. Like I've had people call up here and say, yeah, you know, you all on TV talking all that church stuff. But I know people go to church, don't have good sense like I got. So that's what they were saying. So in other words, they were saying, look, I don't have to go to church to know how to act like I got some sense. Yeah, but you still need to find out about the Lord so you can save yourself. Because you just acting like you got some sense is not going to be enough. You can be a good citizen and a good person, but still, if you don't recognize that you still have sinned and you got to accept Christ, you're going to be in trouble. So that's the point he was making. But by no means was he throwing out the window any works according to the law, telling us we don't have to do it. He wasn't doing that. But read that again, verse 16.
Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ, even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law.
Go ahead.
For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified.
Exactly. Because no matter how good you can be, you already done been bad. So you couldn't be justified by the works of the law. But see, people like to read stuff like this and throw out any responsibility of us keeping the law, period. That is not what he's doing. Notice he's going to follow it up, but if you just stop there, it might sound like that, right? We're not justified by the works of the law, but by faith, right? That's why we believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by faith, the faith of Christ. Of course, because we already sinned. But read verse 17. Let's see, do that mean we just go out and just be wicked now and sin? Go ahead, verse 17.
But if, while we seek to be justified by Christ.
See, you always got to pay attention to the little words like but and if, right? You can't conclude it. It ain't over with. But if, go ahead. While we seek to be justified by Christ, now we're going to let Christ justify us, but we're going to do what?
We ourselves also are found sinners. Is therefore Christ the minister of sin?
Answer that.
God forbid.
God forbid. So that's still not excluding any responsibility on our part, is it? Saying that I can just break the law and sin, because we're going to find out that's what sin is. So obviously I can't sin because the title of the lesson is it's going to be some wages for sin. It's going to be some wages for sin. The wages of sin. The judgment of God. We're going to see that God have always been paying you for sin. So he said, but if while we seek to be justified by Christ, we ourselves are also found sinners. So I'm going to be justified by Christ, but I ain't going to keep the law. I'm just going to sin, because that's what sin is, breaking the law. I'm just going to think that's all it's about, is Christ justifying me. I'm not going to do nothing else. He said, but if while we seek to be justified by Christ, we ourselves also are found sinners, is Christ the minister of sin? Is he your minister to allow you to sin? Which is breaking the law. What's the answer? God forbid, he said, didn't he? Because you have to realize, once you realize you need Christ to justify you from your past transgressions, that's when you got to stop doing it. That's what you have to realize. And then you got to maintain that attitude. Once you stop sinning, you got to make sure you stay in that arena and don't go back and start doing the stuff you used to do. Go ahead, verse 18. He's going to tell you a little more. Go ahead.
For if I build again the things which I destroyed, I make myself a transgression.
See again, so you still got something to do, don't you? And you got to make sure you keep doing it, because he's saying, in other words, Christ is not the minister of sin. So yeah, he got to justify me because I am a sinner. I've been a sinner. But once I come to that knowledge that Christ is justifying me, I can't continue to sin because he's not going to be the minister of sin for me. And once I stop sinning, I got to make sure I stay away from sin, because if I go back to sin, that's what he means for if I build again the things which I destroyed. Look, I destroyed the old way I used to live. You got rid of that. You tore that house down and set it on fire, hopefully, because you'll be trying to go back in there. And he's telling you that, for if I build again the things which I destroyed, I make myself a transgressor. So if you just read a little more in some of Paul's writing, you find out he wasn't doing away with keeping the law, period. He was just telling you what it's going, the whole picture of what it's going to take for you to be saved or justified. Now let's go to Romans 6. This is another favorite one that's been misconstrued to throw people off from getting salvation. And that's real serious. Because if you don't get your act together with the Lord, you're going to miss out on salvation, and that's going to be the worst thing you could ever do. Romans 6. This is a favorite. But we're going to find again, if we don't have to keep the law, that's making it okay to sin. That's what you're saying. Romans 6 and 14. Go ahead.
For sin shall not have dominion over you, for ye are not under the law, but under grace.
See, this is what people have quoted for years, making people think they don't have to keep the law. Again, he didn't say you didn't have to keep the law, did he? Mm-hmm. He didn't say the law is even done away with, as people like to say. But now, again, like Peter said, some of Paul's writing is hard to be understood. He did say something that can be misconstrued and can be confusing. He said, for sin should not have dominion over you. That's the first part of it. Then he said, for ye are not under the law, but under grace. So somebody have twisted that to make you think that means you don't have to keep the law. But again, he's just telling you what state, where you came from and where you at now when it concerns getting salvation. He's telling you what state you in. What he mean by all of this? Look, we all have sinned, the Bible says. Therefore, we were under the penalty of sin. We under the waves of sin. That's why all of mankind died. Don't nobody slip through that crack, do they? All of mankind died. Enoch don't even count, because it's so, 1 out of billions don't even matter. So all of mankind died because of sin, because that's the wage of sin. So, therefore, sin has had dominion over us, hasn't it? It's had dominion over all of us. But Jesus came to get us from under the dominion of sin. He came to get us out of death by dying. He came to justify us, but we saw we just can't keep sinning when he justifies. So that's the point Paul is making. What state we are in now. For sin shall not have dominion over you. He done made a way where sin won't have dominion over you. Then he said, for ye are not under the law, but under grace. He don't mean you don't have to worry about keeping the law, brothers and sisters. He's telling you, he ain't really limited to the sacrificial law that you ain't under, because we ain't got to go sacrifice no animal. But he's not limited to that either. He's telling you, you are not under the whole system of the law, because if you was, you would still be under sin. You would still be under death, because the wages of sin is death. So when you broke the, and that's what it is, breaking the law. So when you broke the law, you was under it. It's just like you go out here and break man's law. You could just run the stoplight. Okay, and then they're going to give you a ticket. Guess what? You are under the law. But even if you got a policeman friend or somebody that got a position, they can have the power to get you from under that law. So you go to court, they say, oh, that's been thrown out. What does that mean? You ain't under that law where you got that ticket from. But do that mean you just go out and keep running red lights and stuff? It don't mean that. So that's what he's talking about. He's not saying you don't have to keep the law. He said, for sin should not have dominion over you, for ye are not under the law, but under grace. Now, if he meant we could just sin and break the law, he wouldn't have said this at verse 15. Go ahead.
What then? Shall we sin because we are not under the law but under grace?
See, they don't keep reading a little further to get to understand. He asked the question,